Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Angela, and I am thrilled to have with me here today Dr. Wayne Baird. And he is a stress management advisor with over 40 years' experience helping individuals, teams, and entire organizations shift from chronic stress to sustainable flow. He's the creator of Spherical Expansion, a simple, powerful breath and visualization technique that calms the nervous system and resets internal stress patterns in real time, which I think we all need. Wayne began his career as a chiropractor, but quickly saw that structural problems were often just surface signals of something deeper. So his work evolved from physical adjustments to internal alignment. And today he helps leadership teams dissolve hidden friction and unlock what he calls organizational fluidity, that elusive state of clarity, connection, and creative momentum that stress tends to choke out. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when stress management goes beyond Band-Aids and becomes a system-wide upgrade, you're about to find out. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Angela.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And, that bio was real quick, but I mean, there's a lot in there to cover. So tell us just a little bit more about yourself and your background. And I know you were a chiropractor, and a little bit more about how you moved into this area that you're in now.
Well, it's sort of a stock story that I share with people, but it kind of explains it that I've never had someone come into my office and say, Doc, my sense of self-worth has been terrible lately, and I've been feeling afraid and disconnected from my family, and it's causing my stomach to hurt really bad, and it's causing me intestinal distress. Like I say, I've never had anyone come into my office and give me that explanation. On the other hand, I have had a number of people come into my office with intestinal disorders and stomach problems. And as we drill down into their condition, we discovered that there's a lot of belief problems that are behind it, that they're having a problem with their sense of self-worth. They're having problems with the amount of fear they have in their life. Their stage presence is horrible. Their connection with their family is really the pits. And as we resolve those belief system conflicts, magically, the intestinal disorders go away and the bowel elimination is restored and so forth. And so it is enough to make me realize that all of the problems aren't necessarily physiological, that they're a combination of your thoughts, your motion, how you move, and your thoughts, and they're even spiritual in nature. And so when you expand the components that make up the homeostasis of a person, you realize that maybe a problem is chemical. Maybe it's physical. Maybe it's a combination of all of these other things, but being able to expand the boundaries to become a little more holistic and address whole being integration gives you a leg up. It gives you a greater opportunity to bring the human back into balance.
I absolutely love that, because I really believe that is the approach to health, that there's so many components to it.
Yeah, and the old cliche, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then all problems will look like nails.
Right.
It's the same thing that if the only tool you have is to put somebody on a bench and crack their neck or their back, then you're looking at that as a solution for all problems. And we both know that's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those people that if I can stay away from meds, like medications of any kind, I believe in some natural remedies for sure. But if I can stay away from those medications, I will. So tell us more about people who are relying on those meds and they want something more natural. How can they heal?
that's a real tightrope wire type response. I don't want to just sit back and trash the pharmacological approach to well-being and the prescription doctors that make that come to life. I don't want to trash them, but at the same time, I don't want to totally give them a free pass. And and the same thing with unnecessary surgeries. I believe, and this is my own bias, I don't have anything to support it, but I believe that probably at least 75% of the human maladies begin in the mind.
Mm.
And so for me, that's going to be one of my starting places. And I'm not going to rule out that a person may eventually need some sort of a chemical intervention. But as a part of the do no harm group of people, I want to make sure that if I can get the job done with some natural ingredient as opposed to something that's inside of the physician's desk reference, the PDR, if I look at the PDR and see an entire page worth of adverse effects that can come from this here, then I'm going to be disinclined to use that as my first approach.
Mhm.
And I would, by researching it, and the good news is we have some brilliant AIs now. If you have a condition and you do something like go to your AI and say, I have this condition, what sort of natural and pharmacological approaches can I take to fix this? You'll get some really good feedback on it. And lo and behold, there are very few conditions that can't be rectified with things that are non-pharmacological, like what your preference is. And as a result, I don't know that many natural approaches to taking care of things that have a whole page of side effects. I'm a chiropractic doctor, and so I'm not allowed to actually prescribe any medications. That's a medical doctor's job. I don't treat diseases. I try and create a homeostatic balance so that those diseases don't really come, or if they do come, they're not a big deal. And what I can recommend is that if you can find a way that minimizes the amount of conflict for you, I would do that before I resort to some of the worst problems that come from it. Can I tell you a horrible story about this? This is a little creepy.
Yeah, go
There
for
was there was a woman came to see me a while back, and she had a diagnosis called a pseudo obstruction of the bowel. I'll break that down, get under the hood a little bit. A pseudo means it's not real. It's just imagined. And obstruction means that something's interfering with the passage of the bowel. A pseudo obstruction of the bowel means that something's preventing the passage of food through the digestive tract, but they just don't know what it is. And her doctor magically assessed that the problem was in the descending colon. And he suggested that they do a surgery and cut a portion of the descending colon out. And he was sure it would fix it. And so she agreed and they cut it out. And time went by and it healed. And she still couldn't have a normal bowel movement. And so the doctor said, I think just didn't get quite enough of it. We need to take a few more inches out. And she went along with it and they took more out. And after that healed, she still couldn't have normal bowel movements. And he said, you know what? We're going to have to take this all the way down to the rectal opening and remove that entire section of the descending colon and sew up your rectum. And you're going to end up having to have a colostomy, but at least you'll live a normal life. And she goes, no, we're not. You strike two. I don't want to give you a strike three. So she went to a couple of other prescription doctors and they said, well, what did your first doctor say? And she explained it to them and they concurred. They said, I agree with them. I think that's probably. So she went along with it and she got the colostomy. She had her rectum sewed shut and she had a plastic bag on the right side of her body where the small intestine dumps into the large intestine. And after it all healed, she still couldn't have a normal bowel movement. And
Oh.
that's when she showed up at my office. And so you're asking why I do stress management? Now you get to find out. I measured her to see what her stress level was, and it was off the chart. Now, let's get clear. Stress is a short term for the long term. It's called sympathetic stress. And sympathetic stress is what they call the fight or flight mechanism. And so anything that doesn't have to do with fighting or running gets shut down. And the first thing that gets shut down is your digestive system. If you're running, you're not in the business of eating, except us, we eat and run all the time. But it shuts down your digestive system. Specifically, it closes down the four valves that are in the digestive tract that interferes with peristalsis, the moving where food gets squeezed along, like what an earthworm does in squeezing the food down the tract. The peristalsis that moves the food down the digestive tract, it shuts it down. And so her food was frozen and it wasn't moving along because the sympathetic stress was so high. And as we drilled down a little further, we found out that there are some problems between her and her family, and she was afraid all the time. Her sense of self-worth was horrible, and a few other things. And we did some treatments on her to try and create a shift in those beliefs that were behind that. And once we got done with that, she was able, her transit time, meaning the length of time it takes for the food to go into your mouth to the time it gets into the bag was like a little over 90 minutes.
Hmm.
Very fast. Things just move through there like, and she wasn't able, she said, that's all there is to it. And it hurt me to tell her that was it. And it became a variation on that other one that this one here says, if the only tool you have is a scalpel, fill in the
Yeah.
blank.
Mm.
And so that's a perfect example of if your lens for looking at something only comes from one place, then all the answers are going to come from that perspective. But the more broad your ability to look at the human condition is, the more you can consider a lot of things and avoid giving medications and surgical interventions that in way too many cases are just unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so sad. And to me, my big dream is that Western medicine would work with natural medicine and that we would be able to share the best knowledge from either space and be able to come up with that happy medium, I guess it is. If we need that, it's there, that Western medicine, the surgery, the meds. And if we don't, that natural medicine is there too. And even I see now there's more hospitals that have Reiki practitioners in the emergency room. And I like to see that going forward. I like to see it all working together. Like you say, I don't want to dismiss science. I don't want to dismiss all of that because I think there's a place for it. And yet, as you just beautifully illustrated, there's a whole gamut of things that we can explore beyond that. And with grief, I know what you're talking about because the system really, when you lose someone, and that happened with me, my digestive system really took a hit. And now, as you explain that, I can see more why. And it took a while for me to move through that. And it took a naturopath and it took doctors and it took lots to move through all of that. So I love what you do. And so, do you have people remotely or do you just work in person? How do you work?
I'm in San Jose, California, and I once had a man come to see me that lived on an island off of the northwest coast of Africa. He was apparently he had the means to be able to travel like that, and he so wanted to be in my presence in order to do that. And I just it's that was the longest commuter for most people that are far away, we work over the internet.
Mm.
And if there's something that they need that requires them to get medical attention or surgical attention or something, I'm the first one to refer them there. I would be nowhere without my brothers in the medical industry,
Mhm.
brothers and sisters. And there's times when you need that. But for a lot of the things, for the entry, the for being able to make initial guesses at what might be going on with them, I'm sometimes a good place to, I shouldn't say sometimes, I have a pretty good success rate at helping people sort out what's going on with them.
Mm. That's amazing.
So most of it is, I would say probably two-thirds to three-quarters of what I do is on the internet. And then for the people that are fortunate enough to be within driving radius of where I am, they'll come in. They
Okay.
complain about the distance, but they do it anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And one of the things that I see here that you can talk to is the whole idea of freedom. And this is a big thing, but I want to open up this can of worms because a lot of us talk about just wanting to be free from pain, free from discomfort, free from sadness, despair, whatever. How do we know when we're truly free?
Well, we have over 8 billion people in the world. And if you gave every one of them a paper and pencil and say, write down your definition of what free is, you would get over 8 billion different responses.
Mhm.
And so your perception of freedom is it's personal for you, just as mine is for me. And I honor what yours is, and I would hope that you'd honor everybody else's perception of freedom and cherish the fact that we do have those differences to have our own interpretation. So all I can tell you is how I see it. So having said that, I'm going to tell you how I see it. In my cosmology, I first I do allergy work. And allergy is a response that we have when we're incompatible with a particular energy. And I know that sounds pretty general and pretty vague, but as you start thinking about it, there are many things that we come in contact with energetically that cause an adverse response with us. When I first figured that out or got that idea, I had an allergen in a sealed bottle. And if it's in a sealed bottle, that means it's not going to affect anybody, but just the energy of it. And when I brought it near to the man that was in my office, I felt his chest tighten up.
Mm.
As I took it away, his chest opened up. I said, no, I'm just imagining this here. But I'd bring it close and take it away. Open. And then I took other things that he was allergic to and I brought them up and the same thing response, closing and opening. This is too crazy. And I did it with other patients, same response. And I just wasn't consciously aware of it. And I spoke with my sister in Florida. She's a double doc down there. And I told her what I was saying. I said, would it be possible to find like a thermographic camera that does infrared thermography so that we could actually tell if this is tightening up? Because when you tighten up, then it's gonna increase the heat, and when it opens up, it's going to become more cool. And so she happened to know someone, and we got this $35,000 camera, and we shipped it out to the West Coast, and we tested 48 people. And looking at them from the neck to just south of the belly button. And as we looked at them naturally, they're like really tight. And you could see a lot of redness and whiteness and orange in the center of the chest on the sternum. And we did an exercise for opening it up, and as it opened up and they expanded, it turned down to blue and green, which is like 3, 4 degrees temperature change difference, and that's pretty impressive. And we did that with 48 people. It wasn't a good high percentage. It was completely across the board. We went down to Florida, in Central Florida, and we did that with 50 people, and we got it with 50 out of 50 people, where we could actually see the thermographic changes for people going through that kind of expansion. So we're moving in the direction of what freedom is. And so the question is, what kind of things could cause a person to expand out and have their energy connect with the life around them? And what kind of things could cause it to contract and go into this protected state of self-isolation? And that's when I started cataloging different beliefs. And we got 31 of the most. And so I started identifying different beliefs, simple things. Do you believe that the world is a dangerous place? Or do you believe that the world is a safe place? And I set up a scale. And the ones that had more of a tendency of believing the world was a dangerous place, they were more holding it in all the time. And the ones that believed the world is a safe place, they were more open all the time. Do you believe, do you believe that life is better for you when you're totally in control? And I would measure people. I'd measure them. You are 100% in control. How okay are you with that? Totally okay with it. Then I go, okay, now you're only 90% in control and 10% of the control is in the hands of someone else. How okay are you with it? Not okay at all. And I started getting really clear about the how important it is for a lot of people to be totally in control. And if they're not totally in control, they get the heebie-jeebies. It really gives them the willies. That between these two extremes called control and collaboration, there's a lot of people that are control freaks out there. You may have met one or two of them in your lifetime.
I might be one.
that the people that ruminate about not being in control, and it causes them to tighten up, and it gives them the creeps. And that's just another one, and there's a whole series of them. And so we developed, I say we, me, I'm the regal we, that I developed a whole series of examination type beliefs of where I could actually look at a belief along a scale and find out where people were on it. And it became really easy to get clear about the things that were contributing to them being in a state of contracted self-isolation as opposed to expanded connection with life. And as I would help them resolve each one of these beliefs, slowly their overall freedom, which I hadn't mentioned yet, I look at freedom on a 1,000 point scale. Zero is they're in a state of absolute contracted self-isolation. 1,000, they're in a state of totally expanded connection with life. And and the average person on this planet, hang on to your hat, is only about 212.
Oh, out of 1,000.
Yep. And as they resolved each belief, their total freedom moved up to where we started getting people. We call it the 990 Club, where they have resolved so many belief conflicts. What I call a conflict is something that's causing them to be in a state of contracted self-isolation as opposed to expanded connection with life. As they resolved each belief that was causing them to not be in an expanded connection with life, the freedom level went all the way up until they got to, like I say, to this place called the 990 Club, where they relax, they're smooth, they don't respond to a lot of nonsense, and they're just pretty happy people. They're going to live a lot longer. My guess, I have no proof of it, but when you see these people, you just can't imagine that they're going to be quick in the grave. They just got this excitement about life that they just imagine physical and spiritual immortality as opposed to wanting to get out of here as quick as they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How fascinating, because in the spiritual world, we talk about beliefs and how important it is to somehow get rid of those beliefs. I don't think you get rid of them, but dispel those beliefs that no longer serve you. But oftentimes, I think we don't even know that we have that. So it's interesting that you have a way of identifying what beliefs are maybe holding you back.
Yeah, if you ask people, what do you believe? They'll tell you what they think. And there's a
Mm,
difference between what you think and what you believe. What you believe determines how you behave and how you feel. What you think is just passing information through, and it doesn't really shift how you believe or how you behave or how you feel. But when you find things that actually determine how you behave in life and how you feel, then you know that you're with one of the beliefs. And when you start getting into things like something that's basic to most people is where are you on the divinity scale? And most people, the divinity scale. And so you have to explain. And once you explain it, people start having an aha moment. For example, is it okay if I talk about this
yeah,
here?
absolutely.
The suppose we have a scale that looks at your potential relationship with divinity. And let's start down at the zero end with a belief that says, I believe there's no such thing as divinity. And then move up one step, the agnostic step, where you doubt that there's any such thing as that. And then you move up a little bit to, I think I may have had an experience with divinity, but it's just one of those things a little higher. I've had several experiences with it to where the number of divine experiences becomes greater and greater. And eventually, it becomes such a constant part of our life that we have this great love for the divinity until it gets to the point that you are such a constant presence in your divine relationship that you start seeing an inescapable connection with it. And as it goes higher, you come to this realization that, of course, there's divinity. I'm it.
Hmm.
And so if you break it down into three areas, there's the no such thing as divinity, to the middle state where there's divinity, but it's something other than me, to the part above that, that's of course there's divinity, I'm it. And you start getting these visions of like a lava lamp. You remember lava lamps?
Yes.
The lava lamp has got the big blob on the bottom, and the little bubbles float out of it, and they have their little experience, and eventually the little bubbles float back in and they merge with the big blob again. And that's kind of the way life is that we come and go from the big blob and we're an integral part of it, and then we're taking it with us as we go along our life journey and we remerge back into it. And there's too many people that have a perception that they're actually being lorded over by the big blob is controlling everything, and doggone it, if you don't do A, B, and C, you're going to live eternity in this hell. And there's too many people on the planet that they're afraid to live out of fear that they may hurt the feelings of the big blob that they come from.
Hmm.
They
Wow.
may have violated the rules. They may have done something. And the connection between all things, there's nothing on this, there's nothing in the manifest eternity that's not alive. You might look at an ink pen or a rock or something, oh, that's inanimate, and that's BS. Because if you look at this thing submicroscopically, it's very busy.
Hmm.
I remember I'd take people out and we would look at the aura patterns of trees, and they would look along the outside edge of a tree, and along the edge of it they would see the aura of the tree. You can see it if you don't blink and you look at the edge of a tree up at a blue sky and you don't blink, and all of a sudden you'll actually see the life energy come on out of the tree, and people go, wow. And then we would go over to a wooden telephone pole and say, now do the same thing. They'd look at it and they go, whoa, and then they'd see the aura on the wooden telephone pole and they would rationalize. They go, well, let's see, this came from a live tree, so I can imagine it's still got the life force energy. Okay, how about this one? Then we would go over to a metal telephone pole and they'd see the same life force coming out of it. And that starts messing with their head because they've been trained to think that it's an inanimate, lifeless object. And they start discovering that there's a life force energy in all things because all things are connected. And if you are a part of this divine eternal domain, and rather than being in the infinite domain, you're in the here and now domain, it doesn't mean that you still can't be a part of that living, loving life force.
Right. Yeah. If
And,
we
and
have
once
these,
you get that, and you come from a place where grief has been very difficult for you, and the idea of separating from a loved one is a tough one. It's separating from a part of ourselves that's important, but it's separating from something that in the eternal domain, you're all part of the same the same eternal stuff.
Mhm.
And your loved one went home before you did. But there should be no disconnection. They're still there. They're just in a different form.
Yeah, and I
They
totally
still,
feel that. Yeah,
they,
and a
they,
lot of
they,
people,
the love is there.
yes, absolutely. I love the way that you explain that with the lava lamp. Okay, so we have these beliefs. How do we work with those? How do we release those? How do we become a member of the 990 club?
Well, it's a process of going through each one of the beliefs one at a time and identifying where the belief up to where are you on that scale. Now, I used to do muscle testing on people, and I'd want to know where are you on this scale, and that became a real problem, and that became one of the stickler points for me in being able to move this process forward. I'll tell you a quick story. There are four women that wanted to go through a process, and we were looking at three common emotions: happiness, unhappiness, and anger. And we were measuring what percentage of your time are you in each one of those states. And three of the women were happy maybe 10, 15% of the time. And the other lady, the fourth lady, was happy about maybe 3 or 4% of the time. Then when we got to the anger, three of the ladies were angry maybe 15, 20% of the time. And the fourth lady was angry like about 75% of the time. And almost immediately, she just remembered an automobile repair that she had to get to. She couldn't get out of there quick enough because being outed on that level, it's not that she's a monster. It's just that it identifies how she feels and behaves in life. And down at the root of it is a belief. And her belief is, I don't feel normal unless I am angry at least 75% of the time. That's her belief. That, and the fix on it, and when you start hearing that language, I don't believe I'm normal unless I am angry. That if she was suddenly angry 90% of the time, she would be over that amount and she would shrink back down. If her anger was only at 30, 40, 50%, she'd find things to get angry about to get up. Hey, you left the cap off the toothpaste, or whatever she needed in order to bring the anger back up to that level. And so we look at it and we get that's kind of like how a quota system works, isn't it?
Hmm.
And I'm imagining, and that's a weird way to look at emotional states, is as though they're like quotas. And then, so once she realized that she was way different than the other three girls, she was kind of like outed and it embarrassed her. And she couldn't get out of there quick enough. And she kept looking at her wristwatch. And within a few minutes, she was out of there. So something almost cool happened that it helped her identify that, but it didn't help her. We may have won a little battle, but we didn't win anything because it didn't help her at all because she just ran. All it did was expose her and embarrass her. And shame on me for doing that. But that was many years ago. And so I try everything in my power to not measure people as to where they are on the scale because it's none of my business.
Mm.
And it's none of my business. And if they can imagine for themselves where they are and take it to the worst possible state of being that they could possibly be in, and we're going to do something kind of like a slingshot projection that the further you pull it back, the further you can toss yourself out in the opposite direction. And we do something that's kind of like that. I help them identify the two extremes in a belief scale. And what I always tell people is that if you're going, that all beliefs are made up.
Mhm.
They're all made up. And if you're going to make up a belief, doggone it, make up one that really works for you.
Mhm.
And so this gives them an opportunity to reframe their belief. Well, instead of believing that I'm angry 75%, maybe it'd be better if I believed that I was angry like maybe less than 1%. Let's do the arithmetic. Let's see, there's 60 minutes in an hour and 24 hours in a day. That's 1,440 minutes in a day. And if I'm angry even 10% of the time, that means over 14 times. That's over 100 minutes in a day. That's like over 3 hours. You can do a lot of damage in 3 hours of anger. You could raise a lot of hell in that short amount of time. And so being able to shift the amount of happiness you have to a higher level and the amount of unhappiness to a lower level and the amount of unhappiness also, it's a very powerful thing. But how can we do that? Now, one of the things that prevents, or that I hate to say the word prevent, although prevent's not a bad word, but undermines or it causes a change to disappear or it collapses the change. And that has to do with mom, dad. 'Cause we find out when and where did this come from? Hypothetically, suppose you're the 75% lady. What if we start doing a test? And let's say you're 50. You're this at 50. Is that who you were when you were 40? Yeah. 30? Yeah. How about, is that who you were when you were back in your mother's womb? Yeah. How about this one? Is that who you were before you came into your mother's womb? No. So something happened inside your mother's womb that all of a sudden you acquired this state of being. And let's take a wild guess. Did you happen to get it? Did you come up with this all by yourself? Or did you maybe acquire it from mom? And there's the answer. And as people grow, you are all that you are because your mom was all that she was. And she was all that she was because her mom was all that she was. And we find this long chain of all the gifts that are passed down generationally in your family, and you're the latest recipient of it. Right?
Mhm.
And so you are all these things. And one of the things that we love to do it and we hate to do it, is make changes in ourselves that would make you different than how your family says, how they think, how they be, how they do. You know, you go away to college or something and you come back and you study everything. You come back and you got all these great ideas that you learn and you go, Mom and Dad, you're never going to believe. Guess what we need to start doing now? Because I found out, and you tell them all about it and they go, wow, daughter, we've been waiting a long time for someone to come and tell us how wrong we are in the way we are. So we should start doing something new. Is that the way it goes? Nah, not at all. Suddenly you discover the things that you can and can't talk about with your mom and dad, and how you can be in order to be in their presence and still be the person that they know you, as opposed to you being so different. And they look at you and go, geez, I used to know somebody that looked a lot like you. But you find there's a separation between parents and children, and there's an abandonment that takes place.
Mm.
With me?
Yep.
And the abandonment, the trying to get out of the orbit that keeps you in a connection with your parents, the further you try and get away from it, the less likely you are to be able to maintain that. Because every time you take on something that's different than what your parents are, if you're 75%, I would guess your mom's probably going to be at least close to that.
Mm.
The old expression, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, applies here. And you find that there's so many similarities from parents to children. And when they try and shift it, what happens is they end up falling back into orbit. It's very difficult. And all the affirmations in the world aren't going to help you.
Mm.
And so there's ways that you can create changes and take your whole family along with you to this new place of being. And it allows you to make these shifts that become permanent for you and permanent for your whole family tree. How's that sound?
Yeah, well, that sounds a lot like the whole ancestral healing piece.
Exactly. And you get to become the Pied Piper. You get to become the one that leads the whole family to this really cool place. Because there's a lot of things in the family history of every family. It's not that they were wrong, because at a particular time in a paradigm of life, paradigms don't get created because they don't have anything else to do. They're the best explanation that we have at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And as time moves on, if a paradigm is still stuck in a place where it was okay and it hasn't moved along, then it's going to become a problem. And there's some paradigms there's some that we look at naturally, but there's others that we're stuck with, ones that have to do with the religious principles and things
Hmm.
like my grandmother lived to be 102. And and she was born back in 1889. And at that time, it was common sense that you didn't drink the water. If you want to live a long time, you don't drink the water, you don't take the baths, you stay as far away from the water as you can. You're going to have a healthier, longer life. And so she would drink water if you held a gun up to her head and pulled the trigger back and say, drink or. But other than that, she never drank water because she was a part of that paradigm where diseases, cholera and dysentery and things like that, where waterborne diseases were rampant, and they would take out 1 million people at a time, just whack them out. And so they learned not to drink water. So meanwhile, back in the 50s and 60s, here she is, and she's still dragging around that belief system from back then, that old paradigm that never shifted up. And my father died at 70 years old because he wouldn't drink water either. You know why he wouldn't drink water? Because his mom wouldn't drink water. And so we get stuck in those ruts, and it's all about abandonment from family principles and family paradigms that go back a long way, and being willing to explore some of these things that, if somebody talks to them about, we're not here to attack your family, Angelina. Honest, we're not, that's not the goal. It's to try and help you gently move from paradigms that no longer serve you as well.
Yeah. So, you know, we might have to have a part two because we're just like, but
Sorry, you get me going. I
no,
can't
it's
shut
all
up.
good. It's all good. It's so fascinating. So, if I wanted to work with you, How would I get a hold of you, or what do you offer for people?
I'm available. I think you have a LinkedIn address.
Yes.
I have my own address is drwaynebaird at yahoo.com.
Okay.
It's pretty easy, but that's my personal address. But I usually talk with people through LinkedIn, and I'm just about to start a new newsletter where I'm going to one of my books. It's a fiction fantasy book. I'm going to put it out serially. It's called The Symbiote, and it's going to be a fun thing to put out. But if you get either on my newsletter, which is going to be coming during the next month, if you either get on the newsletter or you just contact me through LinkedIn or you just send me an email through drwaynebaird at yahoo.com, then we can play ball.
All right. Wow. That's awesome. And do you do, obviously, you do one on one things. Do you do group work or
I
workshops or anything?
I have I have done one-on-one work for many, many years, and what's really driving me right now is the realization that one-on-one, it's going to take a long time to hit 8 million people.
Yeah.
And so my goal is to start working with a larger number of people. I'd like to start with 10, then 20, then 100. And it's possible to do that by not doing individual testing on people. It's important that people have a sense of what the boundaries are in a belief, in any belief, and be able to get a sense of what the extremes are in that. And they can kind of guess for themselves where they are. And sometimes they're right, and other times they're a product of this, where they're in denial about themselves. The world sees them totally different than how they see themselves,
Right.
and they'll go into fighting about it, and it makes it tough, and it doesn't really matter where they see themselves because they're going to imagine themselves getting in the worst possible state so that they can, like I say, slingshot them out
Slingshot.
into a better place. And heaven forbid you would have the same dysfunction as your parents.
Exactly. I like that slingshot analogy. That's very encouraging.
Well, it should be. And cognitive dissonance, that's the
Okay.
word.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah. Okay.
And cognitive dissonance is a lot more rampant than we give it credit for.
Mm,
And it's just acknowledging that we have some beliefs going on that really aren't serving us.
right.
Sometimes it's hard to come to terms with that, especially if the longer we do something that doesn't work, the less inclined we are to let go of it. And it's like letting go of a part of ourselves
Right.
because we are letting go of a part of ourselves.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, thank you for taking the time. Do you have any last words to say before we go?
I have so many
Yeah,
words to say.
I know. That's why there needs
I
to be a
look
part two.
I look forward to connecting with you again, Angelina. The last time that we spoke was a real joy, as this one is. And I hope we have more of these conversations with each other. And I look forward to visiting with you in your private group because that just sounds like a real hoot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know my group is going to love you. So, yeah, thank you for taking the time.
There's a lot of things to contribute to help create a shift in the healthcare, the homeostasis, the whole being integration that I really hope comes. I find it unfortunate that what drives the current condition is a money and greed and stuff like that. And that when you bring in something else, it unfortunately has this quality, it's called a disruptive technology.
Mm,
You know that word. And you have to be careful whose toes you step on, because anytime you do something that has the potential to interfere with anybody else's income, then all of a sudden it's a problem. So how do you get to that place without causing war with somebody whose whole bread and butter is based on the things that you're trying to get rid of?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess as a final, as two final words, I hope and pray. I mean, I probably won't be here 200 years from now, but if I look down on the planet and I see that the entire approach to health and well-being is still being run through the pharmacy, I'm going to roll over in my grave. I will, because my goal is to help make this the kind of a planet that the family of the stars would be proud to come and visit.
Mm, beautiful. I think a lot of people are moving in that direction. And so I appreciate what you're doing and the momentum that you're bringing to it. And thank you again for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Angelina.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for watching, and bye for now.